The sound wasn't the fire roaring. It was the click of the heavy deadbolt sliding shut from the outside of our bedroom door. I rolled out of bed, coughing as thick black smoke filled the room. I crawled to the window, eyes burning, and looked down. Ivy wasn't calling 911. She was standing by her car, kissing a man I thought was a stranger, illuminated by the flames that were about to eat me alive. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. 48 hours earlier, I didn't know I was a dead man walking. I was just a husband trying to fix a marriage that had been bleeding out for months. You missed the turn, Mason, Ivy said, her voice sharp. She didn't look up from her phone. Her thumbs were flying across the screen, typing a message she would inevitably delete before I could see it. I know the way, Ivy, I said, keeping my voice calm. I built the place, remember? She didn't answer. She just sighed, a long, heavy sound that sucked the air right out of the truck. We were heading to the cabin. My grandfather bought the land 40 years ago, deep in the darker parts of the Appalachian woods, and I had spent 2 summers building the structure myself. It was supposed to be our sanctuary, a place where the cell service was spotty and the world couldn't touch us. I thought a weekend away might remind us of who we used to be before the silence started filling up our house. I was an idiot. When we finally pulled up the gravel driveway, the sun was already dipping below the tree line. The cabin looked exactly as I left it. Rough-hewn timber, dark windows, isolated. It was beautiful, but as I killed the engine, I felt a cold knot tighten in my gut. It wasn't the chill in the air. It was the feeling you get when you walk into a room and know people were just talking about you. I'll get the bags, I said. Ivy was already out of the truck. She walked to the edge of the porch, holding her phone up to the sky, hunting for a signal. I told my mom I'd call her when we got in, she said, her back to me. There's no signal out here, Ivy. You know that. She stiffened. I got 1 bar. Just give me a second, Mason. I carried our duffel bags inside. The smell of pine and dust hit me, a smell I usually loved. Today it just smelled old. I started unpacking the groceries, trying to make noise, trying to make the place feel alive. I was putting the steaks in the fridge when I heard the gravel crunch outside. Another car. My stomach dropped. We were miles from the nearest paved road. Nobody just passed by here. I walked out to the porch. A black sedan was pulling up next to my truck. It was too clean for these roads. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall, wearing a leather jacket that cost more than my first car, and he had that easy, arrogant smile of a guy who's never had to work for anything. Lost? I asked, stepping down the stairs. I didn't offer a hand. Ivy turned around, her face flushed. Dominic? What are you doing here? It was bad acting. I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't surprised. She was relieved. Ivy, the man, Dominic, said, spreading his arms. Thank God. My GPS sent me on some crazy shortcut to the ski resort, and my radiator started smoking about 2 miles back. I saw the smoke from your chimney. He looked at me, extending a hand. Dominic, old friend of Ivy's from college. I looked at his hand, then at his car. I didn't see any smoke coming from your hood when you pulled up. Dominic didn't flinch. He just kept smiling. Must have cooled down. Look, hate to intrude, man, but I have 0 service, and I'm not sure I can make it back to the main road in the dark. I looked at Ivy. This was the moment. This was where she should have said, we're trying to fix our marriage. Please leave. Instead, she looked at me with big, pleading eyes. Mason, we can't send him out in the dark. It's freezing. He can sleep on the couch just for tonight. I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth hurt. Fine. Dinner was a nightmare. I grilled the steaks I had bought for a romantic dinner, watching through the kitchen window as Ivy and Dominic sat on the porch. They weren't touching, but the air between them was electric. They were leaning in close, laughing at things I couldn't hear. Every time I walked out, they stopped talking and switched to polite, meaningless chatter. So, Mason, Dominic said, cutting into his steak later that night. Ivy tells me you were in the military. Engineer, right? Combat engineer, I corrected. I built bridges and I blew them up. Dominic chuckled, taking a sip of the wine I had brought for our anniversary. Intense. I guess that makes you a handy guy to have around. I notice things, I said, looking him dead in the eye. I notice when things don't add up. Like a radiator that fixes itself. The table went quiet. Ivy dropped her fork. It clattered loudly against the plate. Mason, don't be rude, she snapped. He's a guest. I'm just making conversation, I said, standing up. I'm going to check the generator. Make sure we have power through the night. I went outside, but I didn't go to the shed. I circled back around to the shadows of the porch. I wanted to hear what they said when the handy guy wasn't in the room. I pressed my back against the rough wood of the cabin wall. He suspects something. Dominic's voice was low, urgent. He's just jealous, Ivy whispered. Her voice sounded different, cold, calculating. He doesn't know anything. He's simple, Dom. He sees what's in front of him. He doesn't look for the hidden angles. Are you sure about the policy? Dominic asked. It's done, Ivy said. For million. Double indemnity for accidental death. But we have to be careful. My blood ran cold. I stood there in the freezing dark, my hands shaking. Not from fear, but from a rage so pure it nearly blinded me. Policy. For million. I wanted to burst through that door and tear him apart. I wanted to scream at her. But my training took over. Assess. Adapt. Overcome. If I went in there now, it was my word against theirs. I needed to know exactly what they were planning. I waited until the lights went out. Dominic took the couch. Ivy came to bed. She didn't say a word to me, just turned her back and pulled the heavy quilt up to her chin. I lay there, staring at the wooden beams of the ceiling, listening to her breathe. I must have drifted off, exhausted by the adrenaline dump. That was my mistake. I woke up choking. The air in the room was thick, hot, and heavy. It tasted like chemicals. My eyes snapped open, stinging instantly. The room was filled with black smoke, swirling like oil and water. Ivy, I coughed, reaching for her side of the bed. Empty. The sheets were cold. Panic hit me like a sledgehammer. Ivy, I rolled off the mattress, crouching low where the air was slightly clearer. The orange glow was dancing under the crack of the bedroom door. I scrambled toward it, grabbing the brass knob. It wouldn't turn. I twisted it hard, rattling the door. It was locked. But bedroom doors in cabins don't lock from the outside. Unless someone wedges a chair under the handle. Or installs a hasp while you sleep. Ivy, open the door. I screamed, slamming my shoulder against the solid oak. It didn't budge. I had built this place too well. Solid timber. Reinforced frames. Then I heard the whoosh sound. The sound of an accelerant catching. The heat spiked instantly. The hallway outside was an inferno. I could hear the roar of the fire eating the dry wood, climbing the walls, racing toward the roof. I stumbled back, coughing violently, my lungs screaming for oxygen. I made it to the window and smashed the glass with my elbow. Cold air rushed in, feeding the fire behind me, making the door rattle as the pressure changed. I leaned out, gasping, preparing to jump. It was a second-story drop onto hard-packed dirt, but I could make it. Then I saw them. Down below, bathed in the flickering orange light of the burning cabin, stood Ivy and Dominic. They weren't panicking. They weren't calling for help. Dominic had his arm around her waist. He was holding a red gasoline can in his free hand, swinging it lazily like a pendulum. Ivy looked up. She saw me in the window. For a second, our eyes locked. I expected to see guilt. I expected to see horror. She just stared at me, her face blank, beautiful, and terrifyingly calm. Then, she turned her face up to Dominic, and he kissed her. It was a slow, passionate kiss, a celebration. They weren't just killing me. They were erasing me. Behind me, the bedroom door began to blacken and warp. The heat was blistering the skin on my back. The roof groaned, a deep, terrifying sound of structural failure. I looked at the drop. I looked at the fire. And I realized the only way out wasn't through the window where they could see me. I looked down at the floorboards. I built this place. I knew where the crawl space vent was. I knew where the weak point in the subfloor lay. I dropped to my knees, the smoke swallowing me whole. I clawed at the floorboards with my bare hands, skin ripping against the splinters. The heat behind me was a living. The board cracked, lifted an inch. I wedged my forearm under it and yanked with everything I had left. The nails screamed as they tore free. Black smoke poured through the gap like water down a drain. I shoved my head through the opening, gasping, my face pressed against cold dirt and rock. The crawl space was only 18 inches high, filled with cobwebs and the smell of earth. But it was air. It was life. I dragged myself through, scraping my chest and shoulders against the rough edges. My shirt caught on a nail and tore. I didn't care. Behind me, the bedroom ceiling groaned one final time, then collapsed inward with a sound like thunder. I crawled, hands and knees, elbows and chin. I crawled through that darkness like a worm, following the faint glow of moonlight filtering through the foundation vent on the far side of the cabin. My lungs were raw. My hands were bleeding. But I kept moving. When I finally squeezed through the vent and collapsed onto the pine needles outside, I just lay there, gasping, staring up at the stars. The roar of the fire was deafening. Embers floated up into the night sky like dying fireflies. I should have run. I should have screamed for help. But I didn't. I rolled onto my stomach and crawled into the tree line, staying low, staying quiet. My training took over again. Observe, assess, survive. I found a spot behind a thick oak about 50 yards from the cabin. The heat was still intense, even from here. The entire structure was engulfed now, flames shooting 20 feet into the air. The cabin I built with my own hands was being eaten alive. And there they were. I couldn't hear the words over the fire, but I watched his lips move. He was calm, rehearsed. This wasn't panic, it was a performance. Ivy pulled away from him and walked closer to the fire. She wrapped her arms around herself, and for a moment, I thought maybe she felt something. Guilt, regret, fear. Then she turned back to Dominic and smiled. It wasn't a big smile, just a small curl at the corner of her mouth. But it was enough. It told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't haunted. She was relieved. Dominic walked over and handed her something, a bottle of water. She took a drink, then splashed some on her face. She was setting the scene, making herself look like the traumatized widow who barely escaped. That's when I heard the sirens. They were faint at first, winding through the mountain roads. Dominic checked his watch, then nodded to Ivy. She took a deep breath, messed up her hair, smeared ash on her cheek. Then she dropped to her knees and started sobbing. The performance had begun. 2 fire trucks and a sheriff's cruiser roared up the driveway, lights flashing, gravel spraying. Firefighters jumped out and started unrolling hoses, shouting commands. But it was too late. The cabin was gone. All that was left was a skeleton of charred beams and collapsing walls. A deputy sheriff, young, maybe mid-20s, rushed over to Ivy. She was still on her knees, hyperventilating, her hands covering her face. "Ma'am, are you hurt? Is anyone else inside?" Ivy looked up at him, her eyes wide and wet. "My husband," she choked out. "He's still in there. I tried to wake him. I tried." Her voice broke. She buried her face in her hands. Dominic crouched beside her, rubbing her back. "She barely made it out," Dominic said, his voice steady and grave. "We were on the couch. We smelled smoke and ran outside. She tried to go back in for him, but I had to pull her away. The flames were too intense." The deputy nodded, writing notes. "What's your relationship to the victim?" "Friend of the family," Dominic said smoothly. "I was staying the night. Car trouble." I watched from the shadows, every muscle in my body coiled tight. I wanted to walk out there. I wanted to stand up and shout that I was alive, that they were liars, that they tried to murder me. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the way Dominic answered without hesitation. Maybe it was the way Ivy's sobs sounded just convincing enough. Or maybe it was the cold, hard realization that if I walked out there right now, covered in ash and blood, I had no proof. No witnesses. Just my word against 2 people who had clearly planned this down to the second. And if they had planned this, If they had taken out a $4 million life insurance policy on me, then they had backup plans, lawyers, stories, evidence I didn't even know existed yet. If I came back from the dead too soon, they would just try again. And next time, I might not be so lucky. So I stayed in the shadows. I watched the firefighters spray water on the smoldering remains. I watched the deputy take statements. I watched Ivy lean into Dominic like a grieving widow leaning on an old friend. And I made a decision. Mason was dead. The man they tried to burn was gone. And in his place, something colder, sharper, and far more patient had been born. I waited until the fire trucks left. I waited until the deputy helped Ivy into Dominic's sedan and they drove away, her face pressed against the window, tears still streaming down her cheeks. Then I stood up, my legs shaking, my lungs aching, and I walked deeper into the woods. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what I was going to do. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. They thought they had killed me. They thought they had won. They had no idea what they had just created. The first few hours after the fire were just pain and distance. I walked until my legs shook, then I kept walking anyway. The woods felt endless, a maze of black trunks and cold air that cut my burned lungs every time I breathed. My hands were shredded, smeared with dried blood and soot. Every step reminded me of two things: the heat of the flames at my back, and Ivy's face as she watched me burn. Calm, almost peaceful. By the time the sky started to lighten, I stumbled onto a narrow service road. No cars, no houses in sight, just a cracked strip of asphalt cutting through miles of trees. I followed it. An hour later, I saw a mailbox, then another, then a wooden sign: Maple Ridge Retreats, private cabins, vacation rentals. I stayed in the tree line, watching. 3 cabins were dark, curtains drawn. One had a for sale sign out front and a lockbox on the door. The driveway was covered in a thin layer of frost without a single tire track. Nobody had been here in weeks. Perfect. I circled to the back, found a small window by the laundry room, and tested it. Locked. I picked up a rock, hesitated for half a second, then shattered the glass with a single hit. Carefully, I cleared the jagged edges and slid inside. The cabin was warm, modern, and quiet. It almost felt wrong to be in something so clean after crawling through smoke and dirt. I moved quickly. First, water. I turned on the kitchen tap and let it run until it turned cold. I drank straight from the faucet, then splashed my face, washing off layers of ash and sweat. The skin on my forearms was red and blistered in spots, but not deep enough to need a hospital. My lungs hurt more than my burns. Next, the bathroom. I found a basic first aid kit under the sink and cleaned my hands as best I could, biting down on a towel as the antiseptic burned. I wrapped my palms with gauze and tape. It wasn't pretty, but it would hold. In the bedroom closet, I found a duffel bag with a few clothes left behind, probably a careless owner. I took a dark hoodie, a pair of jeans, and a beanie. They were a little tight, but they covered the worst of the damage. Only then did I let myself sit on the edge of the bed and really breathe. I was alive. They had planned everything, right down to the gasoline can and the performance for the sheriff, but they hadn't planned on one thing. The man they tried to burn alive had built his own escape route. I lay back on the mattress, staring at the ceiling. It would have been easy to close my eyes and slip into sleep, but one thought wouldn't let me. Vermilion. Policy. Accidental death. I needed proof. I needed information. I needed to know exactly what story Ivy and Dominic were telling the world. I sat up and looked around the room until I spotted what I was hoping for: a small flat-screen television mounted on the opposite wall and a remote on the nightstand. My hands shook as I picked it up. The TV flickered to life, bright and loud. I quickly dropped the volume to almost nothing and flipped through local channels. I didn't have to look long. Tragedy in the mountains last night, a reporter said, standing in front of what used to be my cabin. The skeleton of the structure smoked behind her, charred and twisted. Yellow tape flapped in the wind. Authorities confirm one fatality in a fire that engulfed a private family cabin just after midnight. A picture appeared in the corner of the screen. My face. I almost laughed. They'd used an old photo. No beard, shorter hair. A forced smile from some work event Ivy made me attend. Under it, the caption, Mason Carter, 38. According to his wife, Ivy Carter. The reporter continued. Mason was asleep when faulty wiring likely caused the fire to spread rapidly through the structure. She and a family friend, Dominic Hayes, escaped with minor injuries, but Mason did not make it out. I stepped closer to the TV, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. The screen cut to a pre-recorded clip. Ivy, wrapped in a blanket, sat on the back of an ambulance. Her eyes were red and swollen. There was a small smudge of soot on her cheek that hadn't been there naturally. Dominic stood behind her, his arm protectively on her shoulder. I keep seeing his face, Ivy said, her voice shaking just enough. He was just sleeping. I thought he was right behind me. I tried to go back, but Dominic, he pulled me away. The flames, she pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. He saved my life. Mason would have wanted him to. The reporter nodded sympathetically. Investigators say there is no evidence of foul play at this time. I turned the TV off. No evidence of foul play. Of course there wasn't. They'd done their homework. Gasoline disappears in an inferno like that. A locked door from the outside looks like warped wood in a collapsed frame. And who was going to question the grieving widow whose husband was a handy military guy who probably wired something wrong? I sat back down on the bed. If I wanted justice, I couldn't just be alive. I had to be undeniable. The next few days blurred together in a rhythm of hiding and planning. I stayed inside during daylight, moving only when the sun was down. At night, I searched the cabin for anything useful, laptops, paperwork, receipts. Nothing personal enough to help. It really was just a rental. On the third day, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and barely recognized myself. The man staring back at me had haunted eyes, stubble, and faint burns that traced along his neck and jaw like ghost fingerprints. Mason Carter was officially dead, which gave me one advantage. I could go anywhere now, and nobody would be looking for me. But there was one place I needed to be, more than anywhere else. My own funeral. It didn't take long to find out when it was. Ivy was efficient. She always was when it came to appearances. An obituary online. A public celebration of life posted through the funeral home's site. A date, a time, a place. Saturday, 11 a.m. I borrowed an old pair of sunglasses from a drawer, put on the hoodie and beanie, and left Maple Ridge at dawn, keeping to back roads and cutting through small patches of woods whenever a car came by. By the time I reached town, my legs ached, but my mind was sharp. The church parking lot was already filling up when I approached from a side street. I didn't go anywhere near the front entrance. Instead, I circled around to the back and found a small rise overlooking the side doors and the hearse. I sat behind a tree, high enough to see but low enough to disappear. People started filing in, co-workers, neighbors, a few faces I barely recognized from Ivy's side of the family. They hugged each other, shook their heads, said things like, "So young," and "I just saw him last month." All the standard lines people use when they don't know what else to say. Then a black SUV pulled up. Ivy stepped out first. She was dressed in a simple black dress, her hair pulled back in a loose bun. A delicate necklace I bought her years ago rested against her collarbone. She looked like every grieving widow on every sad news story. But I knew better. Dominic got out of the passenger side. Black suit, dark tie, no sunglasses. He walked close to her, his hand on the small of her back. Too close, too comfortable. He was wearing my watch. It caught the light as he reached up to adjust his tie. Stainless steel, slightly scratched on the underside from years of use. I had taken that watch on deployment. I'd worn it the day I married Ivy. Now it sat on the wrist of the man who tried to burn me alive. My vision tunneled. For a second, I actually started to stand. I wanted to storm down that hill, rip the watch off his wrist, and shove it down his throat. But then the hearse doors opened. They rolled out a closed casket with my name on the brass plate. The sight of it hit me harder than the fire ever did. They were burying an empty box. They were lowering a lie into the ground. And everyone down there believed it. Everyone except me. And for the first time since that bedroom filled with smoke, I felt something other than pain and rage. I felt clarity. If they wanted the world to think Mason Carter was dead, I was going to use that. I watched Ivy dab at her eyes with a tissue as they wheeled the casket inside. I watched Dominic lean in, whisper something that made her nod. I made a quiet promise to myself on that hill. I would not rush this. I would not scream. I would not give them a second chance to kill me. I was going to take their story, their lie, their perfect little performance, and turn it against them. I needed proof. Hard evidence. The kind that couldn't be explained away by a tearful interview or a slick lawyer. Which meant I had to go back to the one place I never thought I'd see again, my office. Carter Engineering wasn't much, just a two-man operation I ran with my former Army buddy, Logan. We handled small commercial jobs, residential remodels, some municipal contracts. It wasn't flashy, but it was steady. And Logan had been holding down the fort while I tried to fix my marriage. I waited until after midnight, 3 nights after the funeral. The building sat at the end of a quiet industrial park, sandwiched between a plumbing supply warehouse and a tax office. No security cameras, no night guard, just a single streetlight that flickered every 10 seconds like clockwork. I approached from the alley, keeping to the shadows. The back door had a basic deadbolt that I had installed myself years ago. I still had the spare key, hidden under a fake rock by the dumpster. Ivy never knew about it. The lock clicked open. Inside, the air smelled like old coffee and printer ink. I didn't turn on any lights. I just used the pale glow from my burner phone, a cheap prepaid I'd bought with cash from a corner store, to navigate through the narrow hallway. Logan's desk was cluttered with blueprints and takeout containers. Mine was neat, organized, untouched. It felt surreal, like walking into a museum exhibit of my old life. I sat down in my chair and opened the bottom drawer where I kept my files. Empty. My stomach dropped. I pulled open the next drawer. Empty. The file cabinet by the wall, locked. I forced it open with a screwdriver from Logan's toolbox. Inside, there were folders, but none of them were mine. Just old project bids and equipment receipts. Someone had cleaned this place out. I leaned back in the chair, trying to think. Ivy had access to this office. She'd come by sometimes to drop off lunch or pick me up. She had keys. She could have walked in any time after the fire and taken whatever she needed. But there was one thing she didn't know about. I rolled the chair over to the corner where an old filing cabinet sat, rusted and dented. It had been here when I first leased the space, and I'd never bothered replacing it. Most people assumed it was junk. It wasn't. I opened the bottom drawer and felt along the back panel until my fingers found the seam. I pressed down and twisted. The false bottom popped open. Inside was a fireproof document pouch. I pulled it out, unzipped it, and spread the contents across the desk. Copies of everything. Bank statements, tax filings, the deed to the cabin, and most importantly, a copy of my life insurance policy. The original policy was simple, a $200,000 payout to Ivy if something happened to me. Standard coverage through my business. Nothing suspicious. But stapled to the back of that policy was something I had never seen before. An amendment, dated 6 weeks ago. The coverage had been increased to $4 million. Double indemnity for accidental death. Beneficiary, Ivy Carter. And at the bottom, in neat blue ink, was my signature. Except I had never signed it. I held the paper up to the light. The signature was close, too close for most people to notice. But I knew my own handwriting. The curve of the M was too wide. The tail on the R didn't loop the way mine did. She had forged it. I kept digging. Behind the insurance paperwork was a folder I didn't recognize, a bank statement for an account I'd never opened. It was in my name, but the address listed was a P.O. box I'd never heard of. There were deposits. Large ones. 20,000 here. 30,000 there. All within the last 4 months. And at the bottom of the statement, a notation, loan repayment, D. Hayes. Dominic. My hands started shaking. I pulled out my phone and took pictures of everything. The forged signature, the mystery account, the loan payments. Every piece of paper got documented, backed up, and saved to a cloud account under a fake email. Then I kept searching. At the very bottom of the pouch was a crumpled envelope, addressed to me, but never mailed. No return address. I opened it. Inside was a single printed page. No signature. Just a short, typed message. Mason, I know what she's planning. Meet me at Sullivan's Diner on Route 9. Noon. Saturday. I can help. D. The date on the postmark was 2 days before the fire. My blood went cold. Someone had tried to warn me. But who? The initial was D, but it couldn't be Dominic. He was the one holding the gasoline can. Unless this was part of the setup. A fake warning to make it look like I had been paranoid or unstable before my accidental death. Or maybe it was someone else. Someone who knew what Ivy and Dominic were planning and wanted to stop it. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into my pocket. Then I packed everything back into the pouch, sealed it, and put it back in its hiding spot. I wasn't taking any chances. If Ivy came back looking, she'd find exactly what she expected. Nothing. I locked up the office and slipped back into the night. But my mind was racing. For $1 million. Forged documents. Mystery deposits. A warning that came too late. This wasn't just a crime of passion. This wasn't two reckless lovers making a stupid mistake in the heat of the moment. This was premeditated, calculated, professional. And if Dominic owed someone money, enough money to need fake deposits and shady loans, then maybe this wasn't even his idea. Maybe Ivy was the one pulling the strings. Or maybe they were both puppets for someone bigger. Either way, I needed to know who D was. The person who wrote that letter knew something. And if they were willing to warn me once, maybe they'd be willing to help me now. I pulled out my phone and searched for Sullivan's Diner on Route 9. Still open. Still operating. I didn't know if the person who sent that letter would still be there, or if they'd even remember. But it was the only lead I had. And right now, leads were all that kept me from walking straight into a police station and risking everything on a story no one would believe. Because the truth was simple and brutal, Ivy didn't just want me dead. She wanted me erased, forgotten, buried under a lie so airtight that even if I came back from the grave, no one would believe me. But she made one mistake. She underestimated the man she married. And now that I knew the full picture, the money, the forgery, the plan, I wasn't just going to survive. I was going to take everything from her. Sullivan's Diner was one of those places stuck in 1985, faded red vinyl booths, checkered linoleum floors, and the smell of grease and stale coffee permanently etched into the walls. It sat on a lonely stretch of Route 9, mostly serving truckers and locals who didn't want to be bothered. I parked my rented sedan around the back, pulling my beanie low and my collar up. It was noon on a Saturday, just like the note had said. Weeks too late, of course, but I had to check. I sat in a booth near the exit, ordering black coffee and keeping my head down. I watched every person who walked through that door. A young couple arguing quietly. An old man reading a newspaper. A tired waitress wiping down tables. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. I was about to leave, convinced it was a dead end, when the door opened again. A woman walked in. She was in her late 30s, sharp features, tired eyes, hair pulled back tight. She wore a waitress uniform from a different diner, the Blue Spoon, under a heavy coat. She looked nervous, her eyes darting around the room before she slid into a booth near the window. She ordered a water. No food. She kept checking her watch. Something about her felt familiar. I watched her for another 10 minutes. She pulled a phone out of her purse, an older model with a cracked screen, and typed a message. Then she set it down on the table and just stared at it, waiting. I stood up and walked over. "Is this seat taken?" I asked quietly. She jumped, her hand instinctively covering her phone. She looked up at me, squinting slightly. "Excuse me. I'm looking for D," I said, keeping my voice low. Her face went pale. All the color drained out of her cheeks instantly. She looked at the door, then back at me. "Who are you?" she whispered. I sat down opposite her. I didn't pull down my collar or take off my beanie. I just looked her dead in the eye. "I'm the man who was supposed to meet you here 3 weeks ago." She stared at me for a long, agonizing silence. Then her eyes widened, filling with genuine shock. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God," she breathed. "Mason." I nodded once. "But the news said you were dead." "The fire." "The fire was real," I said. "But I got out." She slumped back against the vinyl seat, letting out a breath that sounded like a sob. "I tried to warn you. I swear to God, I tried." "Who are you?" I asked again. She swallowed hard. "My name is Daphne. Daphne Hayes." Hayes. The name hit me like a punch. Dominic's sister? She shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "No. His ex-wife." The pieces started to click. "You sent the note." "I heard him talking on the phone," she said, leaning in closer, her voice a harsh whisper. "He calls me sometimes when he's drunk or when he needs money. He was bragging about a big score. Said he found a woman with a rich husband and a weak will. Said it was going to be easy." "Ivy?" I said, the name tasting like ash in my mouth. Daphne nodded. "He's done this before, Mason. Not murder, but the rest of it. Finding vulnerable women, charming them, draining their accounts, then disappearing. That's his game. He's a predator." "But this time he escalated," I said. "This wasn't just theft. It was an execution. He owes people," she said. "Bad people. Gambling debts. They told him if he didn't pay up by the end of the month, they were going to take it out of his skin. He was desperate. And desperate men do terrible things." I leaned back, processing this. Dominic wasn't just a boyfriend. He was a parasite looking for a host. And Ivy wasn't just a victim of his charm. She was a willing partner in murder because she wanted the money just as badly. Maybe she was tired of our quiet life. Maybe she wanted the thrill. Or maybe she was just greedy. "Why help me?" I asked. "Why send the note? Why come here today?" Daphne looked down at her hands. They were shaking. "Because I have a son with him. Leo. He's 7. Dominic hasn't paid a dime of support in years, but he swore that after the big job, he'd take Leo. He said he'd have enough money to fight me for custody. He said he'd take my boy and disappear to Mexico." She looked up, her eyes fierce now. "I can't let that happen. I won't let him take my son." I looked at this woman, terrified, exhausted, but fighting with everything she had. She was my unexpected ally. "Do you know where they are now?" I asked. "They're staying at your house," she said. "I drove by yesterday. His car is in the driveway. They're playing house, Mason, like you never existed." The rage flared up again, hot and sharp, but I pushed it down. Rage was useless. Intelligence was a weapon. "I need to get inside," I said. "Not physically. I need eyes and ears. I need to know what they're saying when they think they're alone." Daphne reached into her purse and pulled out a small keychain. It looked like a standard garage door opener. "He gave this to me years ago," she said, "when we were still married. Said it was a universal remote he bought off some guy. It can clone signals. If you can get close enough to the house when they open the garage." "I can get in," I finished. She slid the remote across the table. "Be careful, Mason. Dominic isn't smart, but he's dangerous. And if he thinks he's cornered, he won't know I'm there," I said, taking the remote. "Not until it's too late." I stood up to leave, but paused. "Daphne, if this works, if I take them down, you get full custody. No fight. No lawyers. He'll be in prison for the rest of his life." She looked at me, and for the first time, a small, hopeful smile touched her lips. "That's all I want." I walked out of the diner and into the cold afternoon air. I had a way in. I had a motive. And I had an ally on the outside. Now it was time to go home. Not as a husband. Not as a victim. As a ghost. The house I built for Ivy sat on a hill overlooking the town. It was a sprawling, modern craftsman design, cedar siding, big glass windows, a wraparound porch. I had poured the foundation myself. I had framed the walls. I knew every squeak in the floorboards and every draft in the attic. And now, I was lying in the crawl space underneath it, listening to the man who tried to kill me laugh at my kitchen table. "Pass the wine, babe," Dominic said. His voice was muffled through the subfloor, but clear enough. "Here," Ivy replied. "Are you sure about the lawyer meeting tomorrow?" Preston said we need to be careful about spending too much before the check clears. "Preston worries too much," Dominic scoffed. "The insurance investigation is a formality. Quinn is just doing his job, ticking boxes. They have nothing. The fire marshal already ruled it accidental." "I don't know," Ivy said, her voice tighter. I feel like someone is watching us." I smiled in the dark. Good. I had been living in the woods behind the property for 3 days, slipping into the crawl space during the day to plant the devices Daphne had helped me buy. Tiny, high-powered listening bugs in the vents. A small camera hidden in the smoke detector in the living room. But surveillance wasn't enough. I needed to break them. I waited until 2 a.m. The house was silent. The master bedroom light had been off for an hour. I slipped out of the crawl space and moved to the back patio. I still had my old spare key to the utility door, but I didn't need it. I had rigged the smart home system years ago. I could control the lights, the thermostat, and the sound system from my phone if I was on the local Wi-Fi network. And I sat on a stump at the edge of the tree line, the glow of my phone screen illuminating my scarred hands. Step 1. The temperature. I opened the thermostat app. It was set to a comfortable 72 degrees. I dragged the dial down. 60, 55, 50. Inside, the furnace kicked off. The house would start to chill rapidly in the mountain night air. Step 2. The memory. I opened the sound system app. I scrolled through the playlists until I found it. Wedding reception. I selected our first dance song, Unchained Melody. I set the volume to 5%. Just a whisper. Barely audible. The kind of sound that makes you question if you're actually hearing it or if your mind is playing tricks on you. I pressed play. Through the listening bug in the bedroom, I heard the rustle of sheets. "Dom." Ivy's voice was groggy. "Do you hear that?" "Hear what?" Dominic mumbled, half asleep. "That music. It sounds like—" "Go back to sleep, Ivy. It's the wind." I turned the volume up to 8%. "It's not the wind," she hissed. "It's, oh my God. That's our song." "Ivy, stop it. You're dreaming." "I'm cold," she complained. "Why is it so freezing in here?" I heard the sound of feet hitting the floor. Dominic walked out into the hallway. I switched the music off instantly. "See?" Dominic called out. Silence. The thermostat probably just reset. Piece of junk. I waited until he got back into bed. 10 minutes passed. Their breathing slowed. Step 3. The physical evidence. I moved to the back door. I unlocked it silently and slipped into the mudroom. I didn't go far, just to the kitchen island. On the counter, Ivy had left her phone and a notepad where she was making a list of renovations they planned to do with my money. New pool, new deck, master bath expansion. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, charred piece of what I had taken from the ruins of the cabin. It smelled heavily of smoke and ash. I placed it gently right in the center of her notepad. Then I took one of the framed photos on the mantel, a picture of me and Ivy from a trip to Napa, and turned it face down. I slipped back out into the night, locked the door, and returned to my spot in the woods. The next morning was chaos. I watched the camera feed on my phone as Ivy walked into the kitchen. She was wearing my old robe. She poured a cup of coffee, looking tired. Then she saw the notepad. She froze. The coffee cup slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. "Dominic," she screamed. It was a raw, terrified shriek. Dominic came running in, wearing just his boxer briefs, a gun in his hand. A gun. I noted that. He was armed. "What? What is it?" he shouted, scanning the room. Ivy pointed at the charred wood, her hand trembling violently. "Where did that come from? Did you put that there?" Dominic walked over and picked it up. He sniffed it. His face went pale. "It smells like the fire," he whispered. "He's here." Ivy sobbed, backing away until she hit the refrigerator. "He's not dead, Dom. He's here. He's watching us." "Shut up," Dominic yelled, throwing the wood into the sink. "He is dead." I saw the roof come down on him. Nobody survives that. Then explain the music. Explain the cold. Explain this. She pointed at the face-down photo on the mantel. Dominic marched over to the patio doors and checked the lock. It's still locked. The alarm didn't trip. Nobody got in, Ivy. You're losing it. I'm not crazy, she screamed. Maybe you're guilty, he shouted back. Maybe your conscience is playing tricks on you because you burned your husband alive. The room went dead silent. Ivy stared at him, her eyes wide. Don't you ever say that out loud. I had found his card in Ivy's trash a few days ago. It rang twice. Quinn, a gruff voice answered. I didn't speak. I just played a recording I had captured from the bug in their bedroom the night before. Ivy's voice, for million. Double indemnity for accidental death. But we have to be careful. I let it play for 10 seconds, then hung up. I didn't need to say anything. The seed was planted. Quinn was a professional. He wouldn't ignore a voice recording like that. He would freeze the payout. He would dig deeper. And while he dug, Ivy and Dominic would rot in that house, trapped with a ghost they couldn't see but couldn't escape. I lay back against the tree trunk, closing my eyes for a moment. The game had changed. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was hunting. The pressure worked faster than I expected. By day 4, Ivy stopped sleeping. I watched her through the camera feed, pacing the living room at 3 a.m., clutching a blanket around her shoulders, jumping at every creak and groan of the house. I thought everything was in order. There's been a development, Quinn said, his tone flat and professional. We've received some concerning information regarding your husband's policy. I need you and Mr. Hayes to come down to my office tomorrow at 10 a.m. Both of you. What kind of information? Dominic asked, leaning closer to the phone. I'll explain everything when I see you in person, Quinn replied. Don't be late. The line went dead. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Dominic exploded. What the hell did you do? He shouted, grabbing Ivy by the shoulders. Did you tell someone? Did you talk? Get your hands off me. Ivy screamed, shoving him back. I didn't say anything. You're the one who couldn't keep your mouth shut. You're the one who had to brag about it to everyone. I didn't brag to anyone. Dominic roared. Who would I even tell? I don't know. Your bookie? Your dealer? Maybe one of your low-life friends you owe money to. Dominic grabbed the whiskey bottle and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the wall, amber liquid dripping down the drywall. We're done, he said, his voice cold and sharp. If Quinn knows something, we split. Tonight. We take whatever cash we have and disappear. We can't run. Ivy cried. That makes us look guilty. We are guilty, Dominic shouted. And if the cops start digging, they're going to find the policy, the forged signature, and those deposits you made into that fake account. Ivy froze. How do you know about the deposits? Dominic's face twisted into something ugly. Because I'm not stupid, Ivy. You thought you were so clever, setting up that little trail to make it look like Mason was hiding money. But if they investigate, they're going to trace it back to you. She stared at him, tears streaming down her face. You said this would work. You said it was foolproof. Nothing is foolproof when you're dealing with an insurance company that doesn't want to pay out $4 million, he spat. I turned off the feed and sat back, letting the cold air fill my lungs. They were breaking, but they weren't broken yet. I needed one more push, something that would force them to make a fatal mistake. The next morning, I waited until they left for Quinn's office. I watched them pull out of the driveway, Ivy's hands gripping the steering wheel so tight her knuckles were white. Dominic sat in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead, jaw clenched. The second they were out of sight, I moved. I entered through the back door again, moving quickly and efficiently. I went straight to the bedroom. Ivy's laptop was sitting on the nightstand, still open. She had been too paranoid to sleep, scrolling through news articles about the fire, reading the comments from strangers offering condolences. I pulled a small USB drive from my pocket, one that Daphne had helped me prepare. It contained a program that would silently copy every file, email, text backup, and photo from Ivy's computer onto an encrypted server. I plugged it in. The program ran automatically. 30 seconds. 40. Done. I removed the drive and slipped it back into my pocket. Then I walked over to Dominic's side of the bed. His phone was charging on the nightstand. I picked it up. No password, typical arrogance. I scrolled through his messages. Most were garbage. Complaints to friends. Angry texts to his bookie. But then I found a thread labeled P. I opened it. The messages were from 2 weeks before the fire. Dominic, it's happening this weekend. Just like we planned. P. Good. Make sure there's no trace. No loose ends. You get your money when he's confirmed dead. Dominic, what about the girl? P. She's useful for now. After the payout clears, do what you want. My blood turned to ice. P. Preston, the lawyer. This wasn't just Ivy and Dominic. Someone else was pulling strings. Someone who had money, connections, and a reason to want me dead. I took screenshots of the entire conversation and sent them to my encrypted email. Then I deleted the evidence that I had accessed his phone and put it back exactly where I found it. I walked out of the house and disappeared back into the woods, my mind racing. Preston had been my lawyer. I had trusted him with my business, my finances, my will. And he had used that access to help orchestrate my murder. The question was, why? I needed to dig into Preston's life. Find his motive. Find his weakness. But first, I needed to know what Quinn was going to tell Ivy and Dominic. I pulled out my phone and called Daphne. It's me, I said when she answered. I need you to do something. Anything, she said immediately. Quinn is meeting with them right now. I need you to go to his office. Pretend you're a reporter or a concerned citizen. Get close enough to hear what's being said. Mason, that's risky. I know, I interrupted. But if Quinn has enough to arrest them today, I need to know. And if he doesn't, I need to buy more time. There was a pause. Then, okay, I'll call you in an hour. She hung up. I sat in the cold woods, waiting, my mind spinning with the revelation. Preston, the calm, professional lawyer who had shaken my hand at the funeral, who had filed the insurance claim on Ivy's behalf, who had smiled and told her, everything will be taken care of. He was the architect. Ivy and Dominic were just the tools. And if I wanted justice, I couldn't just take down the tools. I had to dismantle the entire machine. Daphne called exactly 53 minutes later. They're not arrested, she said, her voice tight. But Quinn froze the payout. He told them the investigation is ongoing. He has questions about the policy amendment and some financial irregularities. They left looking like they'd seen a ghost. Good, I said. That buys me time. Mason, there's something else, she said hesitantly. When I was in the waiting area, I saw someone I recognized leaving Quinn's office through the back door. He looked nervous. Who? Your brother. Evan. The world tilted. You're sure? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Positive. I've seen pictures. You two have the same eyes. I hung up without saying goodbye. Evan, my younger brother. The one I had helped through college. The one I lent $15,000 to when his startup failed. The one who stood beside me at my wedding and told me Ivy was the best thing that ever happened to me. Why would Evan be meeting with the insurance investigator? Unless. I pulled up the files I had copied from Ivy's laptop and started searching. Emails. Bank statements. Anything with Evan's name. It took 20 minutes, but I found it. An email thread between Ivy and Evan from 8 months ago. Ivy, Mason won't sell his half of the land. He's being stubborn. Evan, keep working on him. If something happens to him, the property defaults to you as spouse, right? Ivy, yes, but he has to go first. Otherwise it goes to probate and gets messy. Evan, then maybe something should happen. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. Evan knew. He didn't plan the fire. He probably didn't even know the exact details. But he knew Ivy wanted me gone. And instead of warning me, instead of protecting his own brother, he encouraged it. Why? I kept reading. Another email, dated 2 months ago. Evan, once the estate clears, I'll buy the land from you at 40% market value. You get cash fast, I get the development rights. Win-win. Ivy, deal. Just make sure you don't talk to anyone about this. Evan, I'm not an idiot. The land. Our grandfather's land. 200 acres of pristine mountain property, sitting on a ridge that overlooked the valley. Developers had been circling for years, offering huge sums. But it was family land. Sacred. My father had made me promise never to sell it to outsiders. Evan wanted it, and he was willing to let me die to get it. I closed the laptop and pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to stop the wave of grief and rage threatening to consume me. My wife wanted me dead for money. Her boyfriend wanted me dead to pay off gambling debts. The lawyer wanted me dead for reasons I still didn't fully understand. And my own brother wanted me dead for land. I had no family left. No one I could trust. No one who cared if I lived or died. For the first time since the fire, I felt truly alone. But then, like a cold blade sliding into place, clarity returned. If Evan was involved, then he was vulnerable. He had something to lose. A business. A reputation. A life built on the lie that he was a good man. I could use that. I drove to Evan's office the next morning. He ran a small real estate development firm downtown, the kind of place with expensive furniture and motivational posters about vision and growth. I parked across the street and waited. At 11:30 a.m., he walked out for lunch. He was talking on his phone, laughing, completely at ease. He looked nothing like a man who had conspired to kill his brother. I followed him to a sandwich shop 2 blocks away. He ordered, sat down by the window, and started scrolling through his phone. I walked in, hood up, and sat directly across from him. He didn't even look up at first. Then I pulled the hood back. Evan's face went from relaxed to horrified in under a second. The sandwich fell from his hands onto the table. "Mason," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Hello, brother," I said quietly. He looked around frantically, as if checking to see if anyone else could see me. You're supposed to be dead," I finished. "Yeah, that was the plan, wasn't it?" "I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, but his hands were shaking. I leaned in close, my voice low and cold. "I've read the emails, Evan. All of them. I know about the land deal. I know you told Ivy it would be easier if something happened to me. I know you met with Quinn yesterday to make sure the payout got delayed so you could renegotiate your deal with her." His face crumbled. Tears welled up in his eyes. "Mason, I swear, I didn't know they were going to kill you. I thought she'd just divorce you, and I could buy the land cheap during the settlement. I didn't know about the fire." "You knew enough," I said. "You knew she wanted me gone, and you did nothing." "I'm sorry," he sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I was desperate. The business is failing. I'm drowning in debt. I needed that land." I stood up, towering over him. "You're going to do exactly what I say. You're going to testify that Ivy approached you about the land before I died. You're going to admit you knew she had motive. And you're going to wear a wire when you meet with her next." "She'll kill me," he whispered. "She'll try to kill you if you don't," I corrected. "Because once that insurance money doesn't come through, she's going to need another payday. And you're the only one left who knows too much." Evan stared at me, his face pale and broken. Finally, he nodded. "Good," I said. "Detective Quinn will contact you tomorrow. Cooperate fully." I walked out of the sandwich shop, leaving my brother sitting there in his own guilt and fear. The trap was almost complete. I had Ivy and Dominic paranoid and turning on each other. I had Preston's text messages proving conspiracy. I had Evan ready to flip. Now I just needed one final piece. I needed the dead man to walk back into the light. The morning of the meeting, I woke up before the sun. For a few seconds, I forgot who I was. I was just a man staring at a cracked motel ceiling, listening to the hum of an old air conditioner. Then the memories came back in a rush. The fire, the cabin, Ivy's smile in the flames, the empty casket. Right. I wasn't supposed to exist. I showered, shaved the rough beard down to something neater, and put on the only decent clothes I had left, a dark suit Daphne picked up from a thrift store. It wasn't tailored, but it fit well enough. I buttoned the shirt, slid the tie into place, and finally forced myself to look in the mirror. The man staring back at me wasn't the same one from the obituary photo. My hair was shorter, my jaw more defined, my eyes harder. Faint pink lines traced along my neck and near my ear where the fire had kissed me. I didn't look like a ghost. I looked like someone who had already died once and had no intention of wasting his second chance. I checked my phone. One message from Quinn. Everyone will be in the conference room at 11 o'clock. Wait for my signal. Use the back entrance we discussed. One from Evan. I'm wearing the recorder. Don't make me regret this. And one from Daphne. Whatever happens in there, remember, Leo and I are rooting for you. I slid the phone into my pocket and left. Preston's office was on the 12th floor of a shiny glass building downtown, the kind of place where the lobby art cost more than most people's cars. I didn't go through the marble entrance. I slipped in through the parking garage and took a service elevator up to 11, then walked one flight of stairs to 12, like Quinn had told me. I waited in the stairwell, listening. Through the metal door, voices floated in from the conference room. Muffled, but clear enough. Ivy, Dominic, Preston, Quinn, and, a few minutes later, Evan. Thank you all for coming, Quinn said. His voice had that calm, patient tone of someone who already knew the answers to the questions he was about to ask. Let's go over this one last time, so there are no misunderstandings. This is getting ridiculous, Dominic snapped. We've cooperated, we've answered every question, and you people keep moving the goalpost. Either pay out the policy or don't. Mr. Hayes, you're not the beneficiary, Quinn replied. You're just here as a close associate. I could almost hear Dominic bristle at the choice of words. I just want my husband's affairs settled, Ivy said softly. He worked so hard for everything we had. This whole process has been painful. She was still playing the part. Preston cleared his throat, stepping in with that lawyer voice he used at the funeral. Detective, my client is grieving. If there's something specific holding up the payout, we'd prefer you state it plainly so we can address it and move on. There are a few things, Quinn said. Papers shuffled. First, the amendment to the policy, raising the benefit from $200,000 to $4 million, was filed 6 weeks before Mr. Carter's death. That alone isn't suspicious, but the signature on the amendment appears inconsistent with earlier documents. Preston didn't miss a beat. We've already explained that. Mason injured his hand on a job site last year. His signature changed slightly. That doesn't imply fraud. Maybe, Quinn said. But then we have the deposits. Silence. Roughly $180,000 moved through an account in Mr. Carter's name at a P.O. box address he never used, Quinn continued. Those deposits came from a third party, Dominic Hayes. And yet, Mr. Carter's business records show no invoices, no contracts, no explanation for those funds. That was a private loan between friends, Dominic said quickly. Mason didn't want it mixed with his business. So private he never mentioned it to his accountant? Or his wife? Quinn asked. I could picture Dominic's jaw clenching. Then Quinn played his next card. And finally, there's this, he said. A click. Then my own recording played, my ghost in the wires. Ivy's voice, clear and cold. For million. Double indemnity for accidental death. But we have to be careful. Silence slammed down like a hammer. Where did you get that? Preston demanded. It was sent anonymously, Quinn said. Twice. Along with a message saying I should look closer at the widow and the boyfriend. That could be edited, Preston protested. Taken out of context. Maybe, Quinn said again. Which is why I invited one more person to join us. My hand tightened on the stairwell handle. Evan's voice shook. I already told you what I know. Tell them, Quinn said. Now, in front of each other. Evan took a breath. Ivy came to me almost a year ago about buying Mason's half of the family land. He said no. She was angry. She joked, at first, that things would be easier if he just disappeared. I thought she was blowing off steam. You're lying, Ivy snapped. You're trying to save yourself. 2 months ago, Evan pushed on, his voice cracking. She emailed me again. Said once everything was settled, she'd sell me the land at a discount. I didn't ask what she meant. I didn't want to know. But I knew it wasn't right. He broke off. I could almost see his eyes on the table. Quinn let the silence stretch, then spoke. This is what I think happened, he said. Mrs. Carter and Mr. Hayes, with legal guidance from Mr. Preston, saw an opportunity. Increase the policy. Stage an accident. Pay off debts. Divide what's left. That's outrageous, Preston said sharply. You're accusing me. I'm not finished, Quinn cut in. His tone sharpened. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. You all thought this was over the night that cabin burned down, Quinn said. You mourned. You filed claims. You moved on. There's just one problem with your perfect story. A chair scraped the floor. Someone shifted. Quinn's voice dropped a shade lower. Your victim isn't dead. That was my cue. I pushed the stairwell door open and walked into the hallway. The carpet swallowed the sound of my steps as I crossed to the glass door of the conference room. Through it, I saw them all at once. Ivy at the far side of the table, in a black blazer, hair in a neat twist. Dominic beside her, tense, eyes hard, hands clenched into fists. Preston at the head of the table, expression carefully neutral. Evan at the corner, pale and sweating. Quinn with a file open in front of him, watching the door. He saw me first. His gaze flicked up, and for a split second, something unreadable passed across his face. Then he leaned back, giving me the floor. I opened the door. The room went silent. Ivy turned, annoyed at the interruption. Then she saw my face. Whatever color she had left in her cheeks vanished. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her fingers knocked over a glass of water, spilling it across the table. Dominic pushed his chair back so fast it hit the wall. No, he whispered. No, this is some trick. Preston's eyes went wide, his mask finally slipping. That's impossible. Evan stared at me like he was seeing a ghost and a mirror at the same time. Mason, I stepped fully into the room, letting the overhead lights hit every scar, every line that fire and betrayal had carved into me. Afternoon, I said quietly. Sorry I'm late. Hard to get here when you've already been buried. Nobody moved. I looked at Ivy. Hi, Ivy, I said. Miss me? Her chair scraped as she staggered to her feet. We saw you, the house, the fire. You locked the bedroom door from the outside, I said, never raising my voice. You poured gasoline down the hall. You watched from the driveway while I burned. I built that cabin. Unfortunately for you, I also built a way out. Dominic lunged for the door. Two plainclothes officers who had been sitting in the reception area were already moving. They stepped in, blocking his path. One of them reached for his waistband. The other grabbed his arm. Sit down, Mr. Hayes, Quinn said calmly. If you reach for that gun under your jacket, this ends a lot worse for you than prison. Dominic froze, eyes wild. I turned to Preston. You taught me to trust paperwork, I said. Contracts. Signatures. Fine print. You forgot something, though. He swallowed. Mason, this is a misunderstanding. If you'd just sit, I know about the messages with Dominic. I cut in. The big job. The promise of money once my death was confirmed. You didn't just advise them. You helped build this. Preston's jaw clenched. He said nothing. Finally, I looked at Quinn. You wanted your undeniable proof, I said. Here it is. The man they tried to erase, standing in front of you. Alive. Quinn closed the file in front of him. Thank you, Mr. Carter, he said. From this point on, I'll be leading a criminal investigation for attempted murder, insurance fraud, and conspiracy. Ivy finally found her voice. It came out as a broken whisper. Mason, please. We can talk about this. I panicked. I shook my head once. There's nothing left to talk about. Her eyes filled with tears, not the polished ones from the news, but raw, desperate ones. For herself. For the life slipping through her fingers. Not for me. Dominic tried one last time. You can't prove anything. There's no, Dom. Quinn interrupted, almost bored. Your ex-wife has already given us plenty, and your phones have been very helpful. Dominic whipped his head toward the door like he could see Daphne through the walls. His face twisted with hatred. I took a slow breath, feeling the weight of the room pressing in. For months, I had lived as a ghost. Watching, listening, moving pieces. Now I was back in my own story. And this time, I was going to write the ending. The room went silent when I walked in. Ivy's face drained of color. Dominic stumbled backward like he'd seen a demon. Preston's careful mask finally cracked. Even Evan stared at me like I was something impossible. "Afternoon," I said quietly. "Sorry I'm late. Hard to get here when you've already been buried." Quinn didn't waste time. "Mr. Carter has provided recordings, financial records, and testimony, along with cooperation from Mr. Evan Carter and Ms. Daphne Hayes. We have more than enough for criminal charges." Dominic turned on Ivy instantly. It was her idea. She wanted him dead. "You poured the gasoline." Ivy screamed back. "You locked the door." Preston tried to stand. "I advise everyone to remain." "Sit down, counselor," Quinn said. Two officers stepped forward with handcuffs. "You're part of this too." They cuffed Dominic first. Then Preston, who finally looked small and scared. Ivy stayed frozen in her seat, staring at me. "You were supposed to stay dead," she whispered. "I know," I said. "But fire doesn't always burn what you think it will." The officer moved behind her with the cuffs. She started crying. Real tears this time, but not for me. For herself. "Mason, please," she begged. "Tell them this was a mistake. Tell them you forgive me." I thought about the locked door. The flames. Her smile in the firelight. "I'm not going to scream at you," I said. "I'm not going to spend my life wondering why. You already answered that with every choice you made. But I am going to do one thing. I'm going to walk out of here and keep living. That's the one thing you never planned for." They led her away. Evan stayed behind, broken and quiet. "I'll testify to everything," he said. "The emails, the land, all of it. Tell the truth," I said. "Take whatever comes. That's on you now." I walked outside into the bright afternoon. The world hadn't stopped. People laughed. Cars honked. Life continued. Quinn joined me on the sidewalk. "This won't be over quickly. Trials, hearings, reporters. I can live with that," I said. "The key word is live." He nodded and left. I drove to the cabin site one last time. The foundation was all that remained. Charred concrete and ash. I knelt, pressed my hand against the cold stone, and said quietly, "We're done here." Then I left. The trial came months later. The verdicts were swift. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Dominic took a plea deal. Preston lost everything. Ivy cried through sentencing, but the judge wasn't moved. I didn't celebrate. I just felt the weight lift. Survival, I learned, is its own kind of justice. If this story hit you, drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from, your city or country. What kind of stories do you want next? More military revenge? Family betrayal? Deep emotional twists? Let me know, and I'll bring exactly what you're craving. Gently hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next thriller or epic revenge story. Until we meet again, take care of yourself and the people who would never lock a door on you when the fire starts. Story finished.